So in my contract class, my professor is just hammering me, coming after me, and I'm giving the answers correctly, right? Just to the book, technically sound. And at the end of it, he turns to me and I says, Isaiah, you're 100% right. But the way you're saying it, nobody's going to believe you.
You just got to talk about the right content to convert the right people.
Now, what does the insurance company do with the money? And what they do is they take that money and they invest it. And so they have millions, billions of dollars of our money that's specifically for us in that situation where we're injured. They have it tied up in investments.
I mean, you should be prepared. You should be prepared in case something happens to you. And yeah, it sucks, but to have those conversations and to go through it. But that's just the reality that, we're all going to face at some point, right?
This is Isaiah Jerez. We're here on Turning Point's Covenant of Justice, and today we have with us Kate from Wealthy Creator. We're going to explore today what it means to be on social media, to develop a brand, and how to fight virality versus truth. And at the same time, we're going to get to know Kate a little bit and talk about something that was very impactful in her life. And she's going to share with us something very personal that helped her gain some focus on how to move forward after a struggle in her life. And your title is the head of coaching, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And personal branding.
Yep.
Okay. So, when I first started to grow my business, that became a big focus is who do I turn to? Who do I look to for advice? Because I went to law school, learned a lot about the law, learned a lot about how to think, how to reason, and how to argue. But as far as developing a business and putting out the marketing, I knew nothing about that.
Yeah, that's a common problem I hear with lawyers. Is that piece is a struggle, and marketing is so critical, right, to your business?
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, it's one thing to be a great attorney, but if nobody knows, it doesn't benefit anything.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know about that because you were saying in law school you learn about how to argue and how to communicate, right, and think. So how would you say it applies to social media? Because I feel like those kind of go together.
The social media. So my favorite professor was my contract professor. So first year introduction into law school is they teach through the Socratic method. Basically, as a student, what you've got to do is you got to establish your position for everything.
Okay.
And so regardless of whether or not you're giving the right answer, it doesn't matter unless you have the support. So what the teachers often do is they drill you and they attack you on whatever you're saying, trying to really get the students to understand the reasoning and to stand up for their position.
Okay.
So in my contract class, my professor is just hammering me, coming after me, and I'm giving the answers correctly, right? Just to the book, technically sound. And at the end of it, he turns to me and he says, Isaiah, you're 100% right. But the way you're saying it, nobody's going to believe you.
Wow.
And so for me, the biggest lesson that I learned from law school was not getting the right answers. It was about presentation.
Oh,
and with
that's
social
good.
media, it's the same thing, right? We've got to be able to present in a way that's going to grab people's attention. Because we can be given the right information, but unless anybody's going to be entertained at the same time, they're not gonna stay around.
It's like the conviction behind what you're saying is almost like you believing it so much. That's what I hear you saying, and your energy and the way you deliver it.
Yeah, of course, right. I was very timid. In law school, right. It's a very humbling experience to get attacked by a professor in that kind of way, and so that part of the education to me was one of the most valuable aspects of that law. So now turning that, like what you're talking about, into social media, where you got to be able to educate and entertain at the same time. It's not easy, and then especially, oftentimes I find myself weighing the pros versus the cons of, hey, should I be focused so much on social media, or should I just spend 80 hours a day working my cases?
Well, I think that's the biggest question for not just lawyers, right, but every business owner, and that's what they battle with social media, is they're I know it's important, but then when they get busy, they tend to make excuses and say, well, I'm focused on my business. I don't have time for that, It's really interesting, the mindset. And then they always beat themselves up later, right, because they're like, oh, if I just would have stayed committed to it. So what do you say to that? Like people that constantly make, excuses about it.
Yeah. So one thing that I've enjoyed working with Wealthy Creator is the fact that I'm being held accountable.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know that I've got to have certain meetings or have certain recordings done within a specific time frame. And so having that accountability really pushes myself to say, okay, I can delegate some of these daily tasks associated with my clients off to other attorneys or off to my assistants. And so really having someone holding me accountable has been very valuable to help me take another step in delegating.
Yeah.
Because in reality, I think what we do as business owners is we get so focused on, hey, I can do it the best, and I'm not going to let anybody else do it.
That's true.
But in reality, things just need to get done in order to move everything forward.
Absolutely. I mean, with social media, and you're not a social media guy, right? Like that wasn't like your thing.
Yes. I mean, even nowadays, I shy away from social media.
So you have to kind of force yourself to do this for the business, right? Is that the way you look at it, or how do you think about it?
Yes. So social media, I'm learning and working with Wealthy Creator. I'm trying to figure out this piece out a little bit more, because what I've done is rely heavily on my videographer. My videographer posts content. He'll make comments on social media as well. But while I've kind of learned about the media part, I haven't learned about the social part, how to really be involved with, other people in the community and other, whether or not it's other pages or other people within the community, and how to be a social part in social media.
Which is so important, to really, that's what I'm passionate about, is like creating communities, and not just virality. It's like, let's focus on who needs your video, and then how we just get this group of people that really need you, and you can help them, whether they become a client, like that's obviously the goal, right? Or before they become a client, you add all this value. And then, like in your case, then when they do need you, they remember you. But then even if they never need you, just the impact that you would have on their life in other ways, just from listening to you. Because you have, I really admire you because you're a father of 5 and you've been married for how many years? 20 something?
18 years.
18, almost 20. Yeah. So, that is a huge accomplishment right there. And then just juggling all the different things. And so you just sharing about that, I'm like, I would listen to that, because to me, I think that's valuable, But I think that's the struggle with personal branding, is that especially business owners, they don't want to share too much personal, because they're like, this is for business. And it is to grow your business. But in order to build that community and really get people to trust you, you have to kind of let them in a little bit on you and your story and like your life, because then they feel more connected to you, and then they want to open up and they want to get social with you.
So let me ask you about that a little bit, in building that community and being social. I've heard some I guess edit that part out. Right? let me request it. So let me ask you a little bit about that social aspect of it, because I hear about some. Oh, what is that word? So I got to edit that part again. Right? What is that?
What's the word?
Shortcut. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you a question about that, about the social part of it and building the community, because I hear some shortcuts are to start to collaborate with people, collaborate with some influencers within the community that can then help spread. But as far as looking at the long game, what have you been successful in doing, right? Other than, I guess, one part is posting your personal life on there, but how else have you been able to grow the community?
Yeah, so I think the collaboration is huge. I think that's absolutely necessary, to collaborate with other people to get exposure to their audience as well. And then, of course, obviously you're building a connection with whoever it is that you're collaborating with. So I definitely think that's important. But I think, what I've seen, especially when I analyze Ryan's content, for instance, and I do, actually, let me answer it this way. So when we do our workshop, and you were there at that workshop. So we do some in-person workshops, and we talk about all of this personal branding, production, everything. And when I talk about the personal branding section, I always ask people, why do you follow Ryan? And it's really interesting because every time I ask that question, and I just did this, I just hosted a call right before this podcast, and they said family, faith, consistency, growing a personal brand was the answers I just got today. And then vulnerability, or like I think it was transparency or something. Like he'll just say whatever he believes, regardless of if it's controversial, was what they were kind of saying. And anyway, so then I noticed, and it happens every time, nothing was real estate. But like that's his niche, right? Now it's real estate and social media, but he got started with real estate. Like that's his expertise. But when you ask why do they follow him, nobody said real estate. And so I always find that interesting, because if I say what is he known for, they may say real estate or social media. But if I ask you why you choose to follow him, you don't say that. So, and I don't know what, to me, that just means people follow you because they feel connected to your values, is my belief, and then if you have something else to provide them as far as real estate, social media, law, like legal advice, then great. But that's not why they choose to follow you. So that's just an observation that I've made. So I'd say always go for values.
And opening yourself up to the social media realm and letting them judge as to whether or not they like you, because that's in sales, that's what it comes first. First of all, they got to know you, then they got to like you,
right.
And they got to trust you.
And don't worry about getting everyone to like you. Like I think that's a shift too, is that, and a lot of people will say or get in their head about, okay, well, what's going to be good for the algorithm, or how can I use so the trouble I see with a lot of people is they focus so much on getting a video to go viral or trying to kind of hack the system, right? Like, okay, how do I do whatever's working just to get ahead with views? But then that's not sustainable, because you want that consistent growth and you want that community. So you want to make sure you're getting the right followers, not just any follower, any viewer. And I know when you got started, you went viral pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, right. I had a video that got over 3 million views on Instagram.
Wild.
Yeah, and then the followers just started piling in. But it was a video about how to deal with the police, and something I am passionate about, but not something I deal with professionally. And
so that didn't convert.
It doesn't convert, right?
Yeah.
I got a bunch of calls from people on the East Coast dealing with 1983 claims, civil rights claims, and I don't really deal with those.
Interesting. So you did get calls.
Yeah, we got some calls.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
so it works. Like, yeah.
Right.
You just got to talk about the right content to convert the right people. Yeah.
And it was exciting, right? And we started doing posts after that. You start seeing some of these posts get not that viral aspect, but still getting 100,000 views.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's like, oh, we got to keep doing this. But in the end, it wasn't meeting our end goal in mind. And so how do you shift that with the mindset?
Yeah.
Because then now I start focusing on what I'm doing. And of course, the views and the follows drop dramatically. And so how do you deal with that mindset, going from doing being viral and then shifting back to, okay, let's focus on our core values. And then once you start focusing on your core values again, that's where I've become kind of questionable. Is this really working? Should I just really stick with this? Because I haven't had the same success that I had right away.
Sure. Yeah, that's the struggle for most. And I think, wow, what a great position for you to be in to speak to. Because, I mean, fantastic job to get the kind of views that you got, because that's hard for a lot of people, especially on Instagram. I know people can really gain some traction faster on TikTok, but Instagram, that's hard. So if you got 3 million views, like that's pretty awesome. Even though you got the wrong viewers, but even just to do that, what an accomplishment. So yeah, I think that this is the struggle is then, like you said, you shifted to what you do and trying to focus on that expertise to draw in the right people. And I think you have to do a blend of that, but then you really have to get good at speaking to their emotional state of when they're going to need your expertise more than your expertise. So giving those examples of stories that maybe, so because you do personal injury, right?
Yes, car crash, slip and falls. Yes.
So I think rather than, I think I would say for that, you got to give more specific examples of maybe things that someone could be going through and then your advice on how to approach it versus just saying what you know about how to handle it. Like I would really paint a picture for someone in that aspect. But then, like we were talking about on the personal side, I think you have to share about, I think you have to give people advice on life topics that you're passionate about and draw them into you that way, but then have them associate you with personal injury.
So you say speaking to the emotional state that they find themselves after, let's say like a car crash, right?
Yeah.
And so they're battling with the insurance companies and kind of talk about what it means for me to fight against insurance companies, or talk about general circumstances with prior clients and the difficulties that they've had dealing with insurance companies.
I think that could be really good because if someone's in the middle of that, now I don't know how that works though. If they're, could they be in the middle of that and not have a lawyer yet? Is that a possibility?
Oh yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, oftentimes what insurance companies will do is they try to get on the phone with the injured party right away to try to gain that relationship of trust with them so that they don't go out and hire an attorney.
Okay.
Because if they go out and hire an attorney, more often than not, almost all of the time, the injured party is going to get much more money if they involve the attorney. And the insurance companies know
they don't want that.
They don't want that, right?
Yeah. So I would talk about those experiences, and then like maybe even the creative ways that you have been able to help people, or different approaches that you take versus, I don't know, maybe like what's standard or something. And I don't know what you can share about and cannot as a lawyer, but I think that could be really interesting. And then, I think I've mentioned him before. One of my favorite lawyers to follow is Jefferson Fisher, and he doesn't talk about the law, really. He just talks about communication. And I think it's like how to argue better or something is his like tagline, something to that effect. But it's like, I know he's a lawyer, right? Like I associate him with that, but I follow him because he teaches me different ways to think on how I can communicate in my day to day, so it's like, it's kind of interesting how that works,
Yeah, those communication skills. And so something, but right, as an attorney, having to deal with those different types of, cut that. Let's see, where did I want to go with this?
Even like what you said to me about law school, that was fascinating. Oh, so it's not even about getting the right answer. Like, so we don't, like when you think about that and you go down that and process it, it's like, it doesn't even matter who's the smartest anymore. It's just like who can present their case the best. Like that's what the idea is.
Yeah, it's all about being passionate. And that's one thing that I feel like I really bring to the table for my clients is being passionate for them, caring about them, and fighting for them. And there are so many attorneys that try to step out of their professional life and back into their social life because they don't want to mix the two of them, because it is very heavy, right? We're dealing with people's problems, and if you take it to heart, it's not something that you can leave behind, and it hurts to see what happens to your client.
Yeah.
Right? Because while we fight to get our clients money, money's never going to be enough no matter what amount of money you get for them. And so even though you get the money, those problems, the pain that they are dealing with, you continue to carry that on with them. And, kind of going back to what you're talking about with social media as well, like you got to cross the professional with the personal as well. And you got to mix them too and just don't separate them.
Yeah.
And so, and you have two daughters, right?
I do. Yeah. 7 and 10 years old. Yeah.
How is that involving the two of them in the social media?
Oh gosh, I've had a lot of fun with that. I'm also a realtor, and that's how I got started. I don't actively do that now. I refer everything out, but that was really where my social media got started and evolved. And my daughter at the time, my older one, she was like 6 or 7, and she would pretend to be like me as a realtor and show houses. And people loved that. They thought it was hilarious. And she was basically making fun of me, right? But it made for some pretty hilarious content. So again, then that's just like kind of, incorporating aspects of you as a person. And then I've recently started to share, Justin Barry actually encouraged this, because even though I help clients every day think in different ways and share more, it's harder for yourself. And so he encouraged me to share about my sobriety. So I stopped drinking 1.5 years ago, and I thought nobody will care about that. Like I'm talking about personal branding, Like I did the same thing that my clients do. Sure enough, I shared about that. It's like my best performing content. So, it's crazy what will connect you. But I like how you said about the heart. And then it got me thinking when you were talking about the pain, because as a lawyer, don't you have to you guys put a number, right, on pain and suffering? Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's almost, for me, it's almost a spiritual experience that I've got to go through. Because if I'm going to the jury and asking the jury for a number, it's something that I've got to really feel is just.
How do you figure that out?
Yeah, so the best way that I can do it myself is just to put myself in my client's shoes.
Okay.
Right? Making it very personal and looking to see what they're doing, talking to their friends, talking to their families, seeing what's actually happened to them. But then just living with the client, working with the client, you get to know them as well. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes clients will ask me, how long is this going to take? Mm-hmm. And my general response is, look, you want it to take as short as possible, because then that means that you're not injured, right? You're not that injured. We can get you some money, but you're not going to get that much money. But if I'm living with the client for 1 year or 2, and I really get to know them, I see that the longer I work on their case, the higher my valuation of the case goes, because I understand more and more how it affects them. So the way that we get to that number is by looking at what they're going through in life and seeing that not only through their eyes, but also through the lives of other people that are with them every day. And then coming to a conviction in my heart that this is the number as to what is just for that pain and suffering. Okay. And so there's no quick calculation. There's a lot of different ways where once we find that number, we can then backtrack and say, okay, what does this involve? One way that we presented it to a jury is to say, what if we posted in an ad, right? This is what you have to go through, not only for the past 2 years of your life, but definitely into the future. How much does that mean? How much would you be willing to accept to go through this?
Oh, that's
interesting.
If
this were like a job ad.
Yeah.
So that's one way that we sell it, but there's no specific number, and I just find the more that I get to know the client, the higher that number gets.
One of my favorite movies where, Time to Kill?
Yeah. No, I
with Matthew McConaughey? You have to have seen this.
I don't know it. No.
Oh my gosh. I want you to go watch it. There's this scene at the end of this movie where he's presenting to the jury, right? And it's just a horrific thing that happened. This young girl, I think they're in Louisiana, and she's a young Black girl, and these 2 guys raped her and threw her over a bridge. I mean, just horrific, right? And at the setting of the movie, it's very like segregated and like the whites against the black. I mean, I can't believe we haven't seen this movie. It's so good. But what he does, it makes me think of what you're talking about. So at the end, he asks all of the jury to close their eyes, and then he kind of like tells them a story, right, of what happened to this poor little girl. I mean, just horrific. And then he says, and it gives me chills because it's such a good movie. I want you to imagine her white. And like he wins the case. And it's just like the most powerful scene. That you could feel the emotion. Like, I don't know. This movie, it's pretty old. And I saw it I was young. And that scene has stayed with me forever. And it's like what you just said, like he's putting them in the shoes of his client, right? Like he did, first you put yourself in the shoes, then you got to get them in those shoes. And that's a lot of emotional, I don't know, to present in that way.
And it needs to be done skillfully because as an attorney, it's called the golden rule.
Okay, yeah.
Where we cannot argue the golden rule to the jury.
Okay.
So specifically, we cannot lay that out saying, hey, what if this were your child? What if this was your grandma that was put in this situation?
Okay.
And so it needs to be done
So I wonder
skillfully.
if you watched this movie, if he did it correctly or if it was just more for the movie. Like, I wonder if it would be able to be the way, I don't know, the way he presented it. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, as to whether or not you violated the golden rule.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's, I don't agree with that rule, right? I think our system here in the United States is the best. It's the best system in the whole world. It's not perfect. And this might be one of the issues that, our judicial system hasn't been able to deal with, is this golden rule, because in reality, that's what we're asking the jury to do. You're the peer. You're here to judge your neighbor and determine, whether or not they're guilty in that situation, where you got to look at someone, just being a human instead of black or white. But in our position as well, what does it really mean to go through this?
Right.
And what's the value of going through this? And, our legal system, it has been a little bit archaic in that and not allowing us to argue the golden rule.
Yeah.
But there are ways to present it colorfully.
Yeah, so you have to get creative, I imagine, on how you do. I mean, because every case is different, right? So you have to, maybe a good lawyer would be very good at really analyzing all of those aspects versus maybe someone just going through the motions.
Yeah, and I think it kind of like what you're talking about with social media and taking the mindset of putting yourself in the position as to what people are going through when they're involved in a car crash and speaking to that. As an attorney, that's oftentimes what I do on the reverse, where I know that I'm fighting against the insurance company and I know I'm fighting against defense counsel. And so I put myself in their position and try to see things the way they see it.
Yeah.
Because if I can see their argument from their point of view, it allows me to understand why they're wrong.
Right.
It allows me to then present the evidence or support the evidence that, no, my client is right.
Yeah. Why do you think so many people struggle with, like, empathy, though? Because that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like, to really see someone else's point of view.
Yeah, I think if I were to kind of look at the dark side, I think a lot of it comes from the insurance company and the rhetoric that they develop, in that people who are making claims for personal injury, what they're looking for is money.
Okay.
And that's true. 100% of the time, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for money. And so there's just this negative rhetoric saying, hey, you're just money hungry. You got money hungry attorney, greedy attorney, and all you're looking for is a big payday. You're looking for, to, win the lottery, basically. And so that rhetoric, as a juror, the jurors are sitting there getting $50 a day, and they're having to judge someone to determine what they're receiving. And so they're fighting all this negative rhetoric, I believe, is what they've got to overcome, what we have got to overcome. And to say, okay, yes, we're looking for money, but that's all we can ask for,
right,
is for money.
Yeah.
There's no other solutions. There was, when I was in law school, our teacher shared there was a decision that was in Jerusalem, and there was a mother-in-law and a son-in-law that were fighting. Mm-hmm. And they went to court, and the judge's decision was, okay, what you've got to do, and talking to the son-in-laws, you've got to build a ladder for your mother-in-law to go up to the second floor so she doesn't have to see you, right?
Okay.
Right, yeah. A creative solution.
Yeah.
But here in the United States, that's just, it's not manageable. How are you going to ensure that gets enforced, right?
Yeah.
And so for ourselves, the courts don't have the capacity to manage millions of arguments across the nation. And so what we've come to is say, okay, well, money is going to be the best thing that we can do, is to provide that money. And oftentimes, even though we want to look for something that's more just, whether or not it's, providing some colorful argument to say, okay, well, you put, the injured party in a position where they're not able to clean their house, so you have to go clean their house for 3 months.
Yeah.
To the defendant, right? How are you going to force that across?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Millions of crashes that happen throughout the year, and so it's just a matter of, hey, we're going to provide money.
Well, or what about we're paying for the insurance, right? Every month. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the whole point? Is that in the event that you have a situation that you can be paid? No? Am I not understanding that right?
Yes, no, you're 100% correct, right? Every one of us, every month or every quarter, every 6 months, we
pay.
Throw a bunch of money into the insurance company, right? And then they got this huge pot of money, and the pot of money is just sitting there for this exact reason. Now, what does the insurance company do with the money? And what they do is they take that money and they invest it. And so they have millions, billions of dollars of our money that's specifically for us in that situation where we're injured. They have it tied up in investments. Uh-huh. And so now when we come and we ask for that money, what do they've got to do? They've got to sell their positions. Yeah. And they've got to give it back to us, which they don't want to do. Right. Right. They've got to answer to their shareholders. And so as attorneys, that's our biggest job.
That's what you're fighting for.
Fight them to part with their money. Because
which is what we are entitled to. That's why we pay for the insurance. I mean, you can't really defend someone that doesn't have insurance, right? Or can you?
To defend someone as far as the insurance
company. Like if they don't have car insurance and then they got in an accident, what does that look like? Give me those scenarios.
Yeah, they're sad scenarios. I mean, I could tell you scenario, but probably one of the most striking is somebody who did have insurance, but they didn't have enough insurance. Oh. And this happens more often than not.
Oh, tell me what that means.
Yeah, so there was a 2-year-old kid and was hit by a driver who wasn't paying attention. Oh, God. The child lost his life right in front of his mom and his sister, terrible. And the person had $25,000, $50,000 in insurance coverage, and that was it. Right? Wow. Wouldn't make a dent into the impact that this made on the life of the mother and his sister.
It's terrible.
And so, the insurance company pays that money, but that's not enough. That's never going to be enough money.
Yeah, no amount of money, but that's certainly not. Doesn't even come close. I mean, you can't put a price on a life, right? That's a tough one, too, when you're fighting for that. I mean, because my goodness. I mean, that kid, he was 2 years old. It's like
2 years old, right? And so in those situations, there's no fight. Mm-hmm. Because it's the same situation if somebody didn't have insurance. You can go and collect a judgment against them, get $1 million, $2 million judgment against them, and say, okay, you've got to pay this money. But where does it come from? Right. Because the person that caused the crash, person who killed this young child, could just go file for bankruptcy and it's going to be wiped out. Yeah. And in most circumstances, that's what's going to happen is you just get a piece of paper that just isn't even worth the paper itself.
Yeah, that's terrible. That makes me think too, and this is something that I have thought about as a parent, is having life insurance, not just for myself, but also for my children, which is not a fun topic, but I think it's important to think of all of those things. So I don't. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know how many different insurance policies I have. I think I counted a while ago, and it's like 11 or 12 insurance policies, right? Just all all over with the business, with the home, with the kids, for whatever, right? And it's a matter of defense. This is I know bad things are going to happen, right? We live in a fallen world, and it's just a consequence of just being here. And so, it's tough making those payments each month.
Right.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right? It buys that little peace of mind that if the day comes, then, my wife will be protected, or I'll be protected. And as a mother, how do you wrap yourself around that to say, okay, I'm buying my child life insurance?
Yeah. I mean, at first, I think it was kind of uncomfortable, but I also have it where, it's an investment too that you can tap into and use some of that cash when you're living, right? So to me, it's like that's an investment for them, and then also a protection in the event that something happens. Because if I lost my child, that'd be the most horrible thing, and that would affect my ability to make money, right? Like I wouldn't be able to come to work, like for a while. You don't even know. There's a million things, right, that could be going on in that scenario. And so, to protect yourself, I think it's important. And I lost my dad, and it'll be 5 years in May. And my father was 57 when he died. He didn't have anything in place, nothing. And it was horrible. I watched my stepmother have to deal with a lot and not have any financial support. And then just the things you have to go through, to even the house. Like we had to, it goes through probate, right? And all these things. And you should be prepared. You should be prepared in case something happens to you. And it sucks, but to have those conversations and to go through it. But that's just the reality that, we're all going to face at some point, right?
Yeah.
So, is it time? Oh, dang it. Should we end it on a better note than that?
On a more positive note. So, do you want to go back to social media or something personal?
Whatever you want to do, whatever you feel. I feel like we're in the vibe, so however you feel like it should go.
Yeah. So, and you're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, dealing with, I haven't had to pass through that where I've lost a parent.
Oh, you haven't?
I haven't had to go through that yet. But how do you come on top of that, right? Because, we read the scriptures and we look towards the eternal hope, and especially the resurrection. So how did you come through that personally to say, okay, I've lost my father. Yeah, financially things are tough, but how do you look forward to the future?
Yeah, that was by far the most impactful thing that I've been through in my life, the most painful so far, and also completely changed my life for the better. So it was almost like I don't even know, it was so painful, but yet in a way a blessing, because what it did was it opened my eyes to how precious life is. And my dad had so many big dreams, and I didn't want those to die with him. And so it just made me think, okay, I'm living my life, and I'm not afraid of anything, and I'm going all in. And you may not be here physically, but you'll live on forever through me. And I'll make sure to continue to share your message. And I could even feel my dad with me after he died. It was really crazy. I had multiple, still to this day, I have situations where I'll ask him for a sign or ask him something, I'll talk to him. And then something happens where I'm like, oh, I know that's my dad. It's really wild. You feel, I guess, more connected to your creator than ever before. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Having that reliance upon the creator. That's what he asked for, right? Is you've got to trust me. I'm going to lead you in the right direction.
Yeah.
That my wife's aunt passed away a couple weeks ago, and a couple weeks ago at the funeral, I kind of found that kind of same inspiration where one of her daughters basically said, hey, like recognize your own mortality and see how much time you have left in life and really make the most of it.
Yes.
Most of it. And it sounds like that's what you've been able to do with losing your father.
Yeah. And, and for you being a father of 5, and this is something that came to me too, now being, in personal, helping people with personal branding and social media, is like, because my dad, like I said, he had all these big dreams and we would have many long talks. And I mean, he would be a great podcaster, but I don't have any video of him, right? And I always think, how cool would that be if I had like all these videos of my dad and his talks? And so for you, doing this work of showing up on camera and creating with all these people, collaborating, I think what a special gift for your kids to be able to watch that, even one day after you're not here. And so I would encourage you to think of that when you're creating too, of like, what messages could I leave behind for them that you feel really passionate about, and not just about your profession.
Yeah, I mean, what a great lasting impression it can provide, not only for my children, but for my grandchildren.
Yeah.
And the
It's
impact
so cool.
that would have. Yeah.
That's what I love about video. You live on forever. I mean, there's some videos, right, from back in the 80s, but nobody can play them because we don't have the devices anymore.
You got to find that VHS player, right?
Yeah. So I don't know how that looks in the future, but hopefully we can access it. Well, on the internet, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way. But no, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you for appearing, Kate. And how can people find you?
So you can find me online at Kate Sells Vegas. And give me a follow. I'll follow you back. And I'd love to collaborate if anyone has a podcast. I love podcasting, and I love people. So I love to get to know people and their story.
Great. Yeah, thank you for coming.